Pro-Life Waco presents David and Margaret Bereit for the Second Sunday Luncheon on November 13th, 2022.
Okay, welcome everybody to Second Sunday Pro-Life Gathering. And we're delighted today to have a young couple as our speakers today, David Bereit and Margaret Bereit. And David hardly needs an introduction. He's a speaker and consultant around the country and the founder of 40 Days for Life. And I just want to say one thing by way of introduction of David. When we think about what we do, sometimes it seems like a sacrifice, and it is, and it should be. This is so important that we ought to sacrifice and do some things that may be outside the box, not typical behavior of people. And David became executive director of the Coalition for Life in Brazos Valley. We're in Brazos Valley, so I don't like to say that, Brazos Valley. President for Bryan College Station. And taking that over, he had an employment, I think, in the pharmaceutical industry. And he and his wife, you got to have husband and wife together, said, well, maybe just quit the job and go into that lucrative position of managing a local pro-life movement. And he did that. So just following his example, I encourage you to sacrifice, to do things outside your comfort zone, do things unusual as we stand for life. David Bereit.
Hi, I am Margaret Bereit, and I'm so excited. We are so excited to be with you here this afternoon. Thank you for having us.
All right,
Yes.
I'll bring it back up. Okay, so this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Amen. Oh my goodness. So, John, I need to talk to you a little later because that lucrative local pro-life thing, I didn't know that part. So I have to learn from you how that all works out because it didn't work out that way. Oh, okay. Okay. Well, before I dive into what we're going to address during our time together, I just want to say what an enormous privilege it is to be here with you. I got my start in pro-life work when Planned Parenthood announced they were opening the Bryan abortion facility. That was back in 1998. They announced it 4 years after Planned Parenthood of Waco had opened, and it opened in 1999. And so I began to volunteer in the local efforts, and it wasn't until 2001 that God clearly called me to quit my job as a drug dealer, but it was, as John was saying, all legal. I was a pharmaceutical rep, to dive into running the local pro-life group full time. But early on, as I took that leap, one of my greatest mentors was a gentleman many of you know, Jim Sedlak. And Jim Sedlak was the founder of Stop Planned Parenthood. I know he made many trips to Waco over the years. He has since passed away, God rest his soul, but Jim was a huge hero and mentor of mine. But early on, as I was getting involved, Jim kept talking about this crazy group that was doing amazing things, fighting Planned Parenthood only an hour and a half up the road from where I was living in Bryan College Station. And I was hearing about this guy, John Pisciotta, and I was hearing about this group, Pro-Life Waco. And for my entire time in the pro-life movement, I have looked to what you have done and are still to this day doing in this community as inspiration, as example. And I've looked to John Pisciotta as a mentor at a distance. And I will never forget even the time when, at the time, Gloria Felt was the president of Planned Parenthood Federation of America. And she was coming to Bryan College Station to speak at the Hilton Hotel. And she was going to rally the abortion advocates in our community because it had become this flashpoint in the nation. And so we put out the word to pro-lifers from all over, and John brought a crew down from Pro-Life Waco, and we all formed a ring around the Hilton Hotel as Gloria Felt was out there. And that was when she made some of her infamous comments about pro-lifers being like gnats. And so that was because of Pro-Life Waco, the Coalition for Life, all working together. And I remember at that event, she also talked about, she made a slip when she talked about when Planned Parenthood in Bryan would close instead of using the word if. And that was when we knew its days were numbered. And I believe the same is true for Planned Parenthood in Waco. But it is an honor to be with you. It's an honor to be with my hero, John Pisciotta. And I'm very excited about what you have done, what you are doing, and most importantly, what we're going to focus on today, what you're going to do in this Post-Roe chapter that we are blessed to be in right now. So let me take you back a few months. June 22nd, I was in Sacramento, California. And Margaret was not with me on that trip. I was asked to speak at the California March for Life on the state capitol stairs there. And so I was out there with about 1,000 Californians. And we knew that the Dobbs decision was coming. Obviously, the leaked draft was out there, so we suspected that might still be the path it would hold. And as we were all gathered there in the hot California sun, we were reflecting on this could be the very last March for Life of any kind in the United States of America before Roe is overturned. And we finished that rally, and everybody was in a very excited place, even though they knew in California things would get more difficult before they got better. But they knew that's progress. They would have more of a say on the issue of abortion. And so we finished that event, and I was supposed to fly out that night on a red-eye flight back home to DC and then drive back home. But right after the event, all of us who were from the DC area start getting text messages. There's storms across the country. Every flight back to the east is all canceled. So we all are stranded an extra night. So we stay that night, and all our flights get rebooked for the next morning. And that night, because I knew this Dobbs decision was coming, I just worked through the night. I thought I'll just sleep on the plane in the morning. Everything's going to be great. So I was up the whole night. Wake up in the morning, we all have text messages. Guess what? All the flights have been canceled for today, and they got pushed back. And so this is on now Thursday. So the rally was on Wednesday. So this is now Thursday. And so all our flights keep getting bumped back. So we're all working together and plotting, what are we going to do in this post-Roe scenario that seems to be so likely to happen? And so then we all get rescheduled on flights, red eyes on Thursday night. So I thought, okay, I'll just stay awake until that red eye flight home on Thursday night. So we go to the Sacramento airport, and my flight is on. I get on the flight, and I can't sleep. So I'm flying across the country. But part of it is I'm like, there's going to be any moment now, this decision that could be a seismic change in what we have all prayed and worked for so long. And all of that was running through my brain. So I landed at Dulles Airport in DC in the early morning, about 8 a.m., and it's about an hour drive from there south to Fredericksburg, Virginia, where we live. So I drive home, get home around 9 o'clock Eastern time. I sit down with Margaret and I said, okay, let's do our morning devotionals, and then I'm going to go crash. I'm going to go sleep. I said, the Supreme Court will announce its decisions today, but I think it's going to be next week, so I'll get to sleep. So we sit down, we do our devotionals, we read scripture, we pray together. I pull up the Supreme Court website, and at 10:11 a.m. Eastern, 9:11 Central, the decision drops. And we wept. And immediately, what I thought of is I thought about everyone who has worked so hard for this moment. Everyone who has prayed, everyone who has stood outside of a Planned Parenthood facility, everyone who has led, everyone who has donated, millions of people around our country that God has called and who have answered that call, who have led us to this point where the Supreme Court handed down the decision that overturned Roe versus Wade. As we reflected on that, of course, my mind went back to getting involved in Bryan College Station. It went back to Norma McCorvey, the young woman who was coerced by 2 Texas attorneys to be the Roe of Roe versus Wade, and how that case going up to the Supreme Court, what began in Texas, imposed abortion on the entire nation. But what began in Texas is ending in Texas. And that gave me so much hope thinking of all of you and so many others here. We called our son. We ended up reaching through. Our daughter is a religious sister in Nashville. We're not supposed to be able to talk to her on the phone, but we were able to find a sympathetic sister who said, okay, we'll let you talk to her. This is kind of a big deal. And to share with our daughter, because our kids had traveled to 45 states and 20 nations going around and supporting 40 Days for Life campaigns. And for them to learn that this prayer was answered, that the Supreme Court overturned Roe was such a beautiful moment. And then my phone rang, and it was a reporter from the New York Times, and she said, I just wanted to capture what were your first thoughts? And I shared that we had cried and called our children and thought about all the people who we had been surrounded by over these many years who had been such heroic figures that led us to this point. And that was reported the next day on the front page of the New York Times. But what we recognize is we take this moment, we celebrate what God did in creating the right makeup on the court, in having the justices who had the courage to overturn this unjust decision. But we look at it and we have to realize that that is not the end. And we know that. The Heartbeat Act in Texas, that wasn't the end. The Dobbs decision overturning Roe, that's not the end. The Supreme Court, all they did is recognize there was never any constitutional right to abortion. And so they corrected that and they gave the decision back to you and me, the American people, through our elected officials in the states and in Congress. And so now we have a say. Now we have the ability to not have this all held in the purview of a handful of unelected justices. Now we can have a say to change hearts and minds, to change laws, and to save more lives than ever before. But because it's now going back to the states, and I've been to 22 states over the last few months, we see that some states are in a remarkably better position, and Texas is certainly at the forefront of those. Things are much better, but your work is not done. In states like North Dakota, the last abortion facility closed, but it hopped right across the river, 7 miles from where it had previously been in Fargo, and people are still continuing to go across the border and procure abortions. We see states like Tennessee and Mississippi, and abortions are still happening just outside of the borders. But then we have other states like California, where I was 2 days before the Dobbs decision was announced. And we just saw this past week as Gavin Newsom's Prop 1 was voted in. And this is not only going to enshrine in the Constitution of California so-called rights to abortion, but also it's using taxpayer funds to make California an abortion sanctuary where they're going to build more abortion facilities around the airports so they can fly people in from out of state, have their abortions, and then fly them back home with taxpayer dollars doing this. Estimates are that they are going to have between a 5 to 10 multiple of abortions happening in California within the next year. And even states, I went to New Mexico, to Las Cruces, where the abortion provider from Mississippi that was the case of Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health, they moved to Las Cruces, New Mexico. And while I was there, as they're trying to open that facility, it's now actually open, the people in New Mexico told me they're really glad that Texas doesn't have active abortion facilities anymore, but they went from 5 to 15 overnight after the Dobbs decision. We see states like Massachusetts where they are trying to instill in the budget of the state through Elizabeth Warren and then their new pro-abortion governor that was elected this past Tuesday, line items in their budget specifically to smear pregnancy centers, to attack them and to encourage people to work to close them down. Taxpayer funded. So this is the new climate that we're in. Our work is not done, and if we needed any reminder that our work was not done, this past Tuesday's election should have been a wake-up call for every one of us. Because not only did we see what we learned yesterday is that now pro-abortion legislatures will control the U.S. Senate, we still see there's still play in the House, and likely there will be a very narrow majority of those who say they are pro-life that will be in control of that chamber, but we know that our president is certainly no friend to life. And we look at the 5 ballot initiatives that all went wrong on Tuesday. California's Prop 1, overwhelmingly instilled as law. Vermont, constitutional enshrinement of abortion. We saw in Montana a measure to try to say if a child survives a botched abortion, a late-term abortion, that there would be penalties if they took the life of that child and didn't try to preserve his or her life. And that was struck down by Montana voters. And we saw in Kentucky where they were trying to say that there is no constitutional right for abortion, and that was struck down in a state that is considered to be more pro-life than pro-abortion. And one that should send chills up and down each of our spines is what happened in Michigan. Michigan is a state that's been very pro-life. They have one of the strongest networks of pro-life organizations and leaders across the state. And in 1931, there was a measure passed in Michigan banning abortions that obviously was put in hold because of Roe versus Wade, changing the law of the land for a time. But that was supposed to immediately go back into effect the moment that Roe was overturned, and one judge blocked the implementation of that law, while Planned Parenthood poured more than $10 million into the state, brought 1,000 out-of-state paid people to come in and canvass to get signatures to put on the ballot a constitutional amendment for abortion, and it passed. Michigan is now a state with abortion in their constitution, despite having had, in 1931 and all of this time, a measure saying that Michigan would prohibit abortion. So our work is not done. And what that means to each of us is, first, as people of faith, we need to continue to pray and fast. And I would even say we need to turn it up a few notches. We need to pray for God to move in a mighty way. We can't fight 50 state battles effectively by ourselves. With man, this is impossible. But with God, all things are possible. And also, of course, after we finish our meatballs and spaghetti at John's Second Sunday gathering, we at Seasons need to fast. We need to allow that time of letting go of maybe it's a type of food or drink so that through that time we allow that hunger to be directed towards God and that we can ask Him to transform us and then use us to transform the world around us. We need to pray and fast like we've never done before. And then we need to get to work. And we need to get to work in ways that will effectively save more lives here in a post-Roe America. And that's what we're here to share with you. And I'll share 4 quick ways. I'm going to have Margaret go deep on the 5th way of this because it's one that's critically important for us to really do even more in right now. But we're going to walk through these 5 areas that will help each of us to maximize our life-saving impact in a post-Roe America. Many of these you're already doing. And so these will be but a reminder, but also a realization that we need to do more. So the first area is civic engagement. I will tell you that the abortion industry is putting most of their eggs in this basket right now. What they did a few months back in Kansas, what they just did in Michigan, this is going to be the tactic they're going to rely on more and more. They're going to go into targeted places and they're going to win victories that look impossible because they've got the money, they've got the media, and they've got people they can bring in to do a lot of the door knocking, signature gathering, whatever it takes. So we need to be engaged. And there's 3 fronts of civic engagement that I would encourage you to be continually thinking about and finding ways that you possibly could get more involved or get involved if you're not already. One of these is political. That's getting people elected to office. As you've seen with what just happened with your city council, it's not just U.S. Congress, U.S. senators, and the presidency. In fact, some of the most important races are for people right here in your backyard. When we began our fight against Planned Parenthood in Bryan College Station, our first victory was getting Planned Parenthood kicked out of the Bryan schools. And it was because we found one ally on the Bryan school board, and he gave us the strategy of what we needed to do. He didn't even share our faith. He was a Muslim man, but he was offended by Planned Parenthood's founder, Margaret Sanger, who was a eugenicist racist who wanted to purify the race by getting rid of what she deemed as human weeds, those who were minorities, those who were infirm, those who had health challenges. And he was incensed by this. And he says, we need to get them out of our schools, promoting their offensive sex education programs. And so he taught us what we need to do, helped us to secure that victory. What if we had not had an ally in the school board? So we need to look at the school board. You need to look at your city council. You need to look at local government roles and make sure to help with the candidates who are good and work to oppose candidates who are bad. And I'm not here to tell you who those are or what parties or anything like that. That's easy to figure out. John and his team, they'll help you. Pro-Life Waco will help guide you on that. I would also say there's a possibility somebody in here, your call is to run for office at some point. And you go, David, politics? Are you kidding me? That's a nasty, dirty business. You're right. And that's why we need more good, God-fearing men and women in the process. And maybe God is calling somebody here to run for office at some point. Political. Legislative is the next step. We need to work to support good pieces of legislation locally, statewide, nationally, and we need to oppose bad pieces of legislation. And sometimes these are things that are very obvious, like a Texas Heartbeat Act, and sometimes they're much more subtle than that. A regulation that may be able to be passed that could make Planned Parenthood's business more expensive or more difficult here in Waco. So find out what those pieces of legislation are, work with your elected officials, and then help to promote the good and help to stop the bad. And I would say that as you hear these Second Sunday gatherings, as you get emails, as you get newsletters from John from Pro-Life Waco, they're going to tell you, we need you to act right here, right now, like you did with the Waco City Council. And when they do, take action. It's important. Our legislators need to hear from us. I one time was talking to a U.S. congressman on Capitol Hill in Washington, and I said, what do you consider a lot of phone calls that make you go, whoa, I need to really pay attention to what my constituents are saying? I was shocked when he said 12. If we get 12 phone calls, it seems like a tsunami of support or opposition for a bill. Yeah, we sometimes get form emails that are sent in, but if we get 12 phone calls, we pay attention. 12 phone calls? So when there's a piece of legislation, get on the phone, talk to your legislators, and make sure, advance this good, strip away this bad, and let them know how you feel. Your voice matters. Your elected officials are there to represent you. And the third area of civic engagement is enforcement. And this is one I didn't even know how important this could be. But a woman named Kathy Humbarger in Fort Wayne, Indiana, had worked for years on the political front with Indiana Right to Life to pass a lot of good pro-life laws and legislation. And she would, during 40 Days for Life campaigns outside of the Fort Wayne Planned Parenthood, she saw lots of things happening there. She said, it seems to me like they're just flagrantly violating the law. They're doing things that I know we passed laws to stop. Why is this happening? She started calling her elected official, and they said, well, somebody has to actually report it. We need to trigger enforcement by somebody reporting it. So she and her team started documenting the various abortion facilities in their area, every violation, and they started sending this to the enforcement agencies and to the legislators. They accumulated more than 1,000 reports of violations. They sent these in, and that abortion facility was shut down. Another abortion facility was shut down by simply reporting what they were doing that was wrong, and that abortionist ultimately lost his license, which closed down one of his other satellite facilities. So sometimes, in a state like Texas, there are a lot of good pro-life laws in the books. Get to know what those are, and then as you're praying outside of Planned Parenthood, just keep your eyes open and then know how to report this to the right enforcement agencies. Any organization that can justify killing innocent children will flaunt every law on the book. They don't care. They destroy lives for part of their profit. Even if not currently in Texas, they're sending them across the border and they're profiting from that. So if that organization is doing those things, catch them in the act, shut them down through their own actions. So those are a few thoughts for you on the civic engagement front. Local, state, national. Think of the political, think of the legislative, think of the enforcement. Second category is your ongoing presence. Your ongoing presence outside of Planned Parenthood. And I've talked to Texas leaders who are saying it's really hard to convince people that it's still needed to go out to Planned Parenthood to pray and to be a sidewalk advocate. Some places have seen a decrease of 70% of their volunteers because people think, whoa, Roe's overturned. Don't need to worry about that. They're not committing the abortions here. But as John was just saying a few minutes ago, Planned Parenthood is a cancer in any community, and it needs to be cut out so that this poison does not affect the rest of the community. Planned Parenthood still sells abortions in Waco. They still refer people to other abortion providers for abortion out of state. They still advocate, they still legislate, they do everything they can to promote abortion. And oh, by the way, they're encouraging young people to live risky, promiscuous lifestyles that will lead them into a situation where Planned Parenthood will profit on the back end when they become pregnant and when they are looking for an abortion. This organization is devastatingly bad. I'm in the pro-life movement because they came to my town. Many of you are in the pro-life movement because they came to your town. If they can close their doors for good in Bryan College Station, thanks be to God, they can and they will close their doors. But it's going to require each of us doing our part. And so that means we continue to go, even if the abortions aren't happening here, we need to bear witness outside of these facilities about the harm that's happening. And some of the reasons we go, number one, we bring our prayers there. Where two or more gather in the Lord's name, we're told that he will be present in our midst. Where is he more urgently needed than a place that is promoting death, destruction, immorality? So we bring Christ to that place. We also go because your presence continues to show the community Planned Parenthood is controversial. They're bad for Waco. Your presence is undeniable for people to know that. And for the workers that go in and out of that facility, if all of a sudden that sidewalk just empties and nobody's there, they think, the community finally is supporting us. We've got this. We're good doing what we're doing. They need to know that no, the community does not support what you are doing. And for that woman, this is the most important reason, for that woman who's going in, she's pregnant and she's scared and she doesn't know about CareNet. She doesn't know about Gabriel Project and she's just terrified and she's going to Planned Parenthood. We know from Abby Johnson and others that when people are outside praying, offering help through sidewalk advocacy, the no-show rate goes to 75% of those customers. So just your very presence there could be enough to send a message to that woman. She may approach you. You may be able to talk to her as a sidewalk advocate, but you may never even know that she changes her mind, she leaves, and she goes instead to CareNet where she receives help and support. That presence makes a profound difference. A last thought on the presence as you're working to drive Planned Parenthood out of Waco for good. You actually can have a greater effect when they are not in the midst of committing abortions locally because their guard is down and they are no longer, when they're on abortion day, this is the way it was in Bryan College Station. Abortion day, they had all the escorts and everything was very tense. They had warned people coming in, but on non-abortion days, we actually had a whole lot more conversations on the sidewalk. We were able to be more effective than the days they were doing abortions. So if ever there was a time there needs to be an ongoing presence outside of Planned Parenthood, that time is now, and you need to let others know our work isn't done. This still needs to happen. A third area. So we've gone over the importance of civic engagement, ongoing presence. The third area is one that you excel at, and that's effective education. We have to educate first ourselves. And Pro-Life Waco, just go back to the table and pick up all the literature and read the recommended resources and watch the various videos and learn yourself and then share that education with other people. Share it with your family members, share it with your friends, share it with people in your church, share it with people who don't agree with you, but begin dialogue and begin having conversations. And then as you take that education and you put it on the side of a truck and you put it on signs and you put it on billboards, you are reaching people with the message of life. We need to do more than just legislating, advocating. We need to change hearts and minds. The polling data coming out of Tuesday's election, to me, was heartbreaking to see that right now, more than 60% of Americans are supportive of abortion in some way, shape, or fashion. We got a lot of hearts and minds to change, and we do that through effective education. So whatever the means of educating, whether it's talking to somebody one-on-one, whether it's having a conversation at Planned Parenthood, whether it's a billboard or a sign or whatever, the questions that we need to be thinking about in our head is, first of all, who is it that I'm trying to reach? Who is that audience? Who is that person? And think, is this message meant for that 16-year-old girl who's pregnant and scared? Or is this message meant for her parents? Or is this message meant for a legislator? Think about who you're trying to reach, because that's going to change the message dramatically. Then once you know who you're trying to reach, then you say, where can I reach them? What are the platforms or places where I can have a conversation with them? Margaret and I were just doing some research on this the other day, and I was blown away by looking at where millennials and Gen Z are consuming their information. And it's not the same place that we in our young 50s are consuming information. So if we're trying to reach young people, we've got to go where they are and we've got to engage them the places they are. Now, there's times where we want to engage our peers. We want to engage others, to the church, to get involved, and then we go to those places. But we know who we want to reach. We need to know where do they consume information, where do they make decisions, and then we need to say, what message do we give them in that place? And then the last step of this is, are we able to measure whether we've made a difference? So if we just put messaging out there that makes us feel good, but no hearts and minds change, no lives are saved, is that really affecting change? Instead of saying, if we put out a message, is there a way to see that it's had some impact, some way that we can measure progress? That's what sidewalk advocacy, that's front line. If your message doesn't work, a woman will get a referral and go out of state and have an abortion and a child will die. That's life and death stakes. Some of our messaging at billboard may not be quite as immediate. It's going to reach a broader audience, but is the message on there effective? So I just want to encourage you, as you think about education, think, what do I need to educate myself on? Who am I meant to educate? What am I wanting to educate them on? And what change am I trying to affect, and can I measure that? So just keep that thought in mind. Okay, now I'm going to bring on the most beautiful, amazing pro-life advocate in the entire universe. And she also happens to be my best friend. I love this woman 30 years into marriage more than I did on the day we said I do. But the fourth area that we're going to talk about and Margaret's going to delve into is the importance of the safety net for women. That New York Times reporter who called me on the day of the Dobbs decision, after asking what was your immediate reaction, she said, "So what's the pro-life movement going to do for women now?" And that's the question that's being asked everywhere. Great, you said that if abortion went away, you'd step up and you'd do things to help. Are you really going to do that? So this area of being a greater, stronger, more visible safety net for women is more important than ever. And I'm going to give you one of the best experts on that I know, my best friend, my wife, Margaret Bereit.
Thank you, David. I love listening to him talk. Isn't he awesome? He is so good. I'm so fired up. So I just want to share with you today a little bit about the work that I am blessed to do. I work at a maternity home called Mary's Shelter. And Mary's Shelter is a home for women who are in a crisis pregnancy and who are homeless. And we have been in Fredericksburg for 15 years. We now have 3 beautiful houses that we own and 4 apartments. We are able to house up to 18 women and their babies and their children that they bring with them. And they can live at Mary's Shelter for up to 3 years, which is pretty amazing. We did not start off this way. When Mary's Shelter first started 15 years, it was in the basement of a dear friend's home. And then eventually we were able to rent an apartment. So when these women come to us, they have a beautiful, you should see these homes. Our director is amazing. These homes are gorgeous. She designs them and paints them and everything. And so these women come to these homes and they have this beautiful, clean, and safe space to live and to have their children there. And the thing is that I need to tell you a little bit about our women. So the women that we have at Mary's Shelter, most of these women are addicted or have been addicted to drugs. All of our women have some sort of mental illness, from depression all the way up to schizophrenia and bipolar. Most of our women have been abused sexually, physically, and emotionally. Most of our women have a limited amount of education, and some of them have even been in jail before they came to us. These women are broken. They come from broken families. Many of them do not have a father in their life. Many of them don't have a mother in their life, or mothers that didn't take care of them. Their own mothers were addicted to drugs. But these women come to Mary's Shelter, and yes, they have a space that's beautiful and safe, but you know what? We walk with them. We walk with them, and we help them. We help them to set goals, educational goals, parenting goals, professional goals, their work, and we help them to achieve these goals. We use all the resources in our community to help these women get jobs and to flourish, and it is such an honor to do that. So my specific job, I'm the parent-child coordinator. So I'm basically their cheerleader, which I love, and their mentor. And I also am with them right in the messiness of life. So I'm with them a lot. I'm at the hospital when their babies are born. I'm at the hospital in the middle of the night when a child gets sick and has to be life flighted to a different hospital. I am just with them, helping them to teach our children how to read, or to how do you read to your child, because many of our women don't know. They don't even know, oh, you would read to your child. And so that's kind of like my job. And our women, so many of our women have gone on, because the goal is we want you to be successful. You don't have to pay for rent. You don't have to pay for utility. And we're helping you to get out there. We want you to leave Mary's Shelter and be successful and have your own independent, safe place. So many of our women have gone on to have become RNs, registered nurses, CNAs. They have gone on to be entrepreneurs, and they have their own businesses. So it has been so beautiful to get to see the success stories coming out of Mary's Shelter. Now, not all of our women, that's not us, I can't say that for all of our women that leave Mary Shelter. And I do want to share a couple stories with you. But I also want to tell you what David said. It is so, so important during this post-Roe world that we have maternity homes for these women. At Mary Shelter in Virginia, we are seeing a dramatic increase in phone calls. And they have to go through a process when they call, just like an intake form, and we gather information. And that we are seeing just a tremendous amount of women right now coming to wanting to come and are coming to live at our home. So it's so important. So let me just share two stories with you. So my first story I want to share with you is about a young woman named Cassidy. And Cassidy found herself pregnant, and she was married, but she was estranged from her husband. He had tried to strangle her, and they're both addicted to heroin. And so Cassidy found herself living in the basement, this dark basement, tiny basement of someone's home, and it was full of mold, and she finds out she's pregnant, and she has nothing. She has no money, she has no support, and she's like, I'm going to have an abortion. I'm definitely going to have an abortion. But there was a wonderful Christian woman that was in her life, and this Christian woman talked her out of having an abortion. And she put Cassidy in touch with Mary Shelter because this woman in our community had heard about Mary Shelter. And so Cassidy came to live at Mary Shelter. Praise be to God, during her pregnancy, she was not on heroin. And I was so proud. We were all so proud of her. We were walking with her. She got a job. She was taking a couple courses online, college courses. She was actually doing pretty well. She really was. She has this gorgeous baby, Ezekiel, big old blue eyes, blonde hair. He's like the most joyful baby, gorgeous, gorgeous child. We're so happy. And she was really doing well. But then when Ezekiel was about 9 months old, things changed. And she got involved with a group of very, very bad people. A lot of drug addicts and drug users. And she began using heroin again. And her life she lost her job. She stopped going to school. She couldn't take care of her child. She could not take care of him anymore. So praise be to God, he went to live with a very wonderful Christian couple and is still with them for now. But she had to leave Mary Shelter, and it was not on good terms. It was terrible. But I have been very close to her, and I still am in communication with her. She ended up having to go to jail after she left. She got into a lot of trouble with her boyfriend and doing drugs and selling drugs. So she had to go to jail. She's out of jail now, but she's making terrible decisions in her life. And so, but as our director, Kathleen Wilson, says, we are planting seeds and we do not give up hope. There is always hope. We pray for her. I'm still in touch with her. She was just calling me the other day. I was talking with her. We encourage virtuous behavior. So that's what I was talking to her about at that time. But she knows that I am here for her, and those lines of communication are open. Now, another story. This is a really wonderful success story. So about almost 2.5 years ago, a young woman named Michaela came to us. So Michaela was 18 years old, living in Northern Virginia, and she found out she was about to start as a freshman in college at George Mason University, actually where our son goes to school. And she found out right before she was about to start college that she was pregnant. She has a boyfriend. Well, when her father found out she was pregnant, he said, "You're going to have an abortion." And her boyfriend and her boyfriend's parents said, "You're going to have an abortion." But her mother, who happens to be a very devout Catholic, said, "No, I don't want you to have an abortion." But Michaela felt so pressured that she said, "I'm going to have an abortion." So that day, when she went to the abortion center in Northern Virginia, as she walked in there were all these people praying there as she was walking in. She walked in there and she sat down and she just said, "I can't do this. I can't go through with this." So she walked right past all those people who she didn't know were praying for her, and the Holy Spirit was using them, answering their prayers. And she went home, and her father said, "Fine, you're going to have this baby. You can't live at my house anymore." So Michaela is so depressed. She has nowhere to go. So she found herself sleeping on couches of, friends' apartments, but she had nowhere to go. Well, her mother got in touch with Catholic Charities in Northern Virginia, and Catholic Charities put her in touch with Mary's Shelter in Fredericksburg, Virginia. So I remember the day that Michaela came to us because it was actually my fourth or fifth day on the job working at Mary's Shelter. And here comes this 18-year-old Michaela, scared to death, young, depressed, immature, but she's going to have this baby. So she comes to us, and we got to witness as a staff a total transformation in this young woman in a year. It was the most incredible thing I've ever seen in my life. She got a job. She continues to take her online. It was during COVID, so she's taking her online courses through George Mason. She started listening to us, and she started reading about parenting and about finances and all these things. And then she started asking us questions, great questions. And then not only was she asking the right questions, she actually did what we said. We're like, oh my gosh, someone at Mary's Shelter is listening. She did. And her father, and this is the other beautiful thing, her father's heart, her boyfriend's heart, and his parents' hearts began to change. Because as her tummy grew, they got really excited. And so when that beautiful, gorgeous baby, Amy, was born that spring, I will never forget. Her father was elated. He started financially supporting her. He was just her biggest cheerleader. Her boyfriend was so thrilled. And finally, his parents even came around. And this whole time, of course, her mother was her huge advocate. So Michaela left us. She was with us for a year. She just matured and grew. The other thing is she was born Catholic. She was raised Catholic. She went to Catholic school, elementary school, but she hadn't really been, and she actually went with our family for Easter Sunday Mass. That was like a week before she had Amy. So she's came to Mass with us and decided to have her baby baptized in the Catholic Church, which her baby was baptized. She is going to church now. And so Michaela, she left Mary's Shelter on a happy note. She had an apartment near George Mason University. She was going to go to school. Her mother was going to take care of her baby, Amy, while she was going to school. She's doing that. And she got a job. She got her driver's license. I mean, it's just amazing. And then you might know a little bit about Michaela's story because this past January at the March for Life, she was one of the speakers. If you saw the March for Life on EWTN, she was speaking from stage. And I actually was so blessed. I was asked to go with her because she was very nervous, So I just stood. I was way back in the back. I stood in the back on the stage with her, and she rocked it. And it was so beautiful because she told her story. She told the blessing of her beautiful baby, Amy. And when she finished speaking, the entire crowd started chanting, Amy, 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 her sweet baby. She was just so excited. So she is continuing to flourish. I speak with her often. I go up there and have lunch with her. It's very convenient because my son's out there too at Mason, and we just could not be more proud of her. She's also been in different national, like CBS and other news outlets. She's been interviewed on television. She's been in newspapers. She's fabulous. So praise God. Now, yes, so great. So now I'm saying all this, but what does this have to do with you in Waco, Texas? How does everything I'm saying affect you? Well, as we said, maternity homes and maternity ministries are just even more important now than they ever have been. So I would encourage you here in Waco to please, 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 the first thing I'd say is support your pregnancy centers, support the Gabriel Project here with both your time, talent, and your treasure. Get involved. Learn about them. They're so important. They're doing vital work. Praise God. And also, can I just say, please pray for all of us who are involved in maternity ministry. We really need your prayers. It's really beautiful and very, very challenging work. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing that I would say is to educate yourself, kind of what David was saying. Learn about the ministries here in Waco, Texas, and the surrounding area that these women can take advantage of. And that includes places like Elizabeth House and Bryan College Station. That's a home. They're actually opening up their second home for women. Like at Mary's Shelter, we get women from all over the country that come to us. It's not just women in Virginia. We have the Sisters of Life in New York City. We get we're just about to get a woman from New York City. We have women coming to us from Maryland, from West Virginia, from Pennsylvania. So take advantage of what you have here in this whole central Texas area and learn about that. And then when you learn about it, go out and share it. Again, what David's saying. It's so interesting when we have women come to us like, how did you find out about Mary's Shelter? It's like, well, someone told someone and someone told this person. And I mean, it's fascinating, all the stories that we hear of how women found out about us. But it's because people in their communities were educated and they knew Mary's Shelter in Fredericksburg, Virginia, their maternity home, they're doing great work. So please educate yourself. The third thing I would ask you to really pray about and think about is, where is your role in the pro-life movement? And maybe God is calling you, maybe he's been doing one thing, but maybe he's kind of calling you to look into something else as well, or to start something else. So I want to encourage you to pray about getting involved in maternity home ministry. I know John was sharing with me that here in Waco, CareNet provides homes for women. That is so beautiful. So I encourage you to look into that. And the other thing about that is, if you're interested in that kind of work or volunteering there, because volunteers are the backbone of Mary's Shelter. We could not have Mary's Shelter without the volunteers. We could not. So if you're interested in that, take advantage of the resources available to you. So for example, I already mentioned Elizabeth House and College Station. They would love to help you. The other one I would say is Kathleen Wilson. Our director, Mary's Shelter, she is right now so busy. She has people all over the country coming to her saying, we want to open a ministry for women, a maternity home, because we know we need it. And so she just opened a home in West Virginia, one in Richmond, Virginia, another one that's opening soon. They're just getting all started. She's helping with is Magella House in Pensacola, Florida. She helped Elizabeth House and College Station open. She is so generous with her time and resources that and the things she's learned over 15 years of doing this. So take advantage of people like Kathleen, because we need this ministry so bad right now in this post-Roe world. So thank you so much for listening to me. God bless you, and I can't wait to hear what David has to say next. Thank you.
I'm really baffled why they would ask her to be a cheerleader for the moms. So we've covered 4 of the 5 areas. I'm just going to touch on the last one and then give you a final thought to wrap up. And then we can stick around for questions as we need to, or as you have questions. But we've covered civic engagement. We've covered the ongoing presence. We've covered the effective education. Margaret did a great job of the safety net for women through pregnancy care centers, maternity ministries, providing help, walking with women and their children. And the last area is one that's going to seem a bit obscure, but something that's been very much on our heart recently, and that when I was emailing with John in preparation for coming here, interestingly, we shared that same sense of urgency, and that is the family and a healthy sexual ethic. And you may say, what's that have to do with this? Well, it has a lot to do with it, because as the family goes, so goes our community, so goes our state, so goes our nation, and so goes the world. Largely, we are in this situation of abortion because of the breakdown of family and a breakdown of understanding of God's plan for the gift that he gave us of our human sexuality. And so a few thoughts on this to realize is that we're treating a symptom. Abortion is a symptom of all of these other problems, issues, the breakdown of the family, as Margaret shared. Issues of people not, particularly young people, not understanding the proper use for the gift of sexuality. So we need to, while addressing this symptom, we need to go a little bit upstream and also address some of the cause of this. And I want to encourage you, I was thrilled to hear John talk about this upcoming session that's going to deal with chastity, the parenting and grandparenting for chastity in life, because that's how Margaret and I first got involved in pro-life work. We saw Planned Parenthood opening in Bryan College Station. We said, we don't know what to do. And somebody said, why don't you put on a chastity rally for kids and their parents? We're like, are you kidding us? And somehow God had a sense of humor because that's what he had us do as our first steps. Before then, I left my job and took over that Coalition for Life. But if we can help young people understand how to live good, virtuous, holy relationships, for them to understand and embrace that God has given us this gift of sexuality, it's a wonderful gift. But he also gave us guardrails to show us how to use this gift in a way that is life-giving rather than a way that is detrimental to life, as Planned Parenthood exploits on a daily basis. We have wonderful resources like St. John Paul II did deep teachings on theology of the body, and I don't have enough time to go into that, but helping young people to appreciate and understand relationships and sexuality, but also that carries on into when they're seriously dating, when they're engaged for marriage, that marriage preparation, and that early time of being a young married couple. So what can each of us do? Well, those of us who are married, number one, live out your marriage in a beautiful way that radiates your love for one another and your love for Christ to the world around you. You have no idea what a powerful form of evangelization a healthy marriage and family can be. So number one, just continue to renew your marriage commitment and your family life and also your relationships with your children. Keep building those. But then number two is find ways to encourage those who are maybe a little bit younger, a little bit further back on the road than you. You've been down the road. You've got some bruises to show that you've been down that road. Be willing to reach back. And maybe it's to mentor a young married couple, or maybe it's to help young couples in their dating to help them live out virtuous relationships. Margaret and I never would have thought that we would do that. We thought we're not experts. We've had lots of failings. We've made lots of mistakes. But what we found is there are young people starving for the truth. In this culture where so many young people are coming from broken homes and broken families, they're looking for examples. They want, in their heart of hearts, they want good relationships. They know that the hookup culture is devastating. They see the wreckage all around them. They're looking for truth. They're looking for real love, not the lust that is sold to them by the world. So I would just encourage you to think about all the cultural issues, whatever it is that weighs on your heart, the things that break your heart. How many of those would be solved if we had a loving, Christ-centered family in every home? I would wager that almost every one of our cultural problems, Planned Parenthood would have no business in Waco or anywhere in the United States of America were there a loving, Christ-centered family in every home. So I'd encourage you to make that a part of your pro-life efforts. And I commend John for recognizing the importance of chastity and marriage and family, because that really is upstream. And that's how we prevent people from being in a situation where Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry can prey upon them. Now, all of this that we're talking about is not easy. And you've got to weigh a lot of things, as Margaret said, to discern and find your place in this. But look at this. This is not a sprint. This is a marathon. It took 49 and a half years to overturn Roe versus Wade, and now we've got more work ahead of us than that which we have behind us. So be in this for the long haul, and be in this just saying, God, where do you want me to be involved? And then as he reveals that to you, say, yes, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. I'll finish with one last thought, and I'm going to take you back where I started, and I'm going to take you back to that California March for Life 2 days before the Dobbs decision. Because right as I was about to go up and give my comments at that rally, my phone in my pocket buzzed. I was like, oh, I forgot to turn on the Do Not Disturb. So I pulled it out to turn it off, and it was a slew of pictures that came in a text message. It was pictures from a woman named Yvonne Viramontes. And Yvonne I had gotten to know as the leader of the 40 Days for Life in the east suburbs of Los Angeles, and she hadn't been able to come that day up to Sacramento. But those pictures reminded me of a number of years earlier, 12 years to be precise, when Yvonne had called me after leading 3 40 Days for Life campaigns in La Puente, California, the suburb outside of Los Angeles. And she said, David, we thought our prayers weren't being answered. We never saw any impact, but by the grace of God, the abortionist just closed up shop overnight, left town, the facility closed down. And she said, will you come out here? We're going to have a rally to thank God for answering our prayers. And so I flew out there on a plane. I had to fly back that same night. But when I got outside of that La Puente abortion facility 12 years ago, Yvonne introduced me to a young woman named Laura. And Laura was holding in her arms a tiny newborn baby she named Leah. And Laura told us that she had been going to that abortion facility when it was still open. And when she drove, her mother was driving her in. They drove past the people praying outside, like what Margaret was describing in Northern Virginia. As they drove by, Laura in the back seat, as her mom drove her in, started to cry and said, "Mom, why are those people yelling at me?" And her mom turned around and said, "What are you talking about? They're praying silently." And Laura said, "It's like they're yelling inside of my head." And her mom said, "Maybe that's God trying to tell you something." And through her tears, Laura realized that God was trying to tell her something. She told her mom, "Pull the car over." She jumped out. She ran to the people praying outside, and they took her to the local pregnancy center. And she chose life that day. And she was introducing me just a few months later to that baby outside of the now closed abortion facility, this little perfect girl named Leah. And she invited me to hold Leah. And as I held this little girl, I thought she was that close to being a statistic. What if people hadn't been praying? What if people hadn't been at the pregnancy center? What if there wasn't support for local pro-life efforts? Leah would not be alive today. And as I held her that morning, I thought, this is worth everything. All the struggles, all the challenges, worth it in this moment. But I didn't realize it was not just that moment. Because over the years, Yvonne continues to send me pictures. And that day, right as I was about to speak at the California March for Life, reflecting on this would be the last March for Life before Roe would be overturned, I got pictures of a now 12-year-old Leah. She's going to school. Her mother and the father got together and ended up getting married. She has a little brother. She's a beautiful girl. And to see her grow up and to realize this is not just about the baby. It's not just about the pregnant mother. This is about children who are going to grow up and change their world. And that's why we do this as a marathon and not a sprint, is because you have an opportunity, you have an obligation to be involved in these efforts that can change hearts and minds, that can save lives, yes, today, this week, but also impact generations to come. So let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. And the last thing to remind you of is this all began in Texas, through the Roe versus Wade decision and Norma McCorvey. What began in Texas will end because of Texas and because of you and because of Pro-Life Waco. God bless you.